What's up, you freaking geniuses? So in this video, I'm going to teach you how to factor expressions with rational exponents, or in other words, fractional exponents. All right, so we're just going to go over a few examples, starting with an easier one first. All right, so here we have x raised to the 3/2 minus x raised to the 1/2. Now, in order to factor this, the first term we can factor is an x, right? We can see that both of these terms have an x, so let's factor out an x, all right? The other thing that you want to do is factor out the smallest exponent. So here we have 3/2, here we have 1/2. The smaller exponent is 1/2, right? So we're going to also factor out a 1/2, right? So now that we've factored out this term, what are we going to be left with right here? Well, whenever you factor something out, it's basically the exact same thing as dividing, all right? So this thing that we factored out, the x raised to the 1/2, it's the same thing as just dividing both of these by x to the 1/2 and dividing by this one, or dividing this one by x to the 1/2, right? How does that help us out? Well, as you can see, we basically turned it into a little division problem, all right? So let's just write it down here. So for instance, this one, we have x raised to the 3/2, right? X raised to the 3/2 over x raised to the 1/2, right? Now, in order to divide exponents that have the same base, like we do here, you simply keep the same base. So here's an x, so you just keep the x. And then you simply subtract the exponents, and you always write the one that's on top first. So here we're going to say 3/2, and then we're going to subtract the one on the bottom, which is 1/2, right? So here, this is going to be equal to x raised to the 3/2 minus 1/2. That's equal to 2 over 2, which is equal to x raised to the first power, which is equal to simply just x. All right. So here, x raised to the 3/2 divided by x raised to the 1/2 is equal to just x. All right. So that's what we have up here, right? So that means this thing right here is equal to just x. Okay, great. So there's our first term. And then here you can see we're subtracting, so we'll keep that subtraction sign right there. And then now we just need to divide these two, right? But as you can see, we have the exact same thing on the top as we do the bottom, right? X raised to the 1/2 over x raised to the 1/2. And anything divided by itself is equal to simply 1. Okay, so here we were able to factor out this x raised to the 1/2, and in parentheses, all we're left with is x minus 1. Boom. All right, now for this example, we have 4x raised to the -2/3 plus 8x raised to the 1/3. Okay, so this time we have coefficients, right? This 4 and this 8. So the biggest number we can factor out of both of these is a 4. All right, they both also have an x, so we can also factor out an x. And then with the exponents, remember you always want to pick the smallest one, and this one's negative, so this one automatically is the smallest one, right? So we're going to factor out this -2/3, all right? So now, what do we have left in our parentheses here? So again, we can just turn this into a division problem, right? So first, we're going to take our first term right here, so 4x raised to the -2/3, and we're going to divide that by what we factored out, which is 4x raised to the -2/3. Now, anything divided by itself, again, is equal to simply 1, right? So then here, we're going to have just a 1 right there, okay? Now here, we're adding, so we'll put our plus sign right there. And let's clean this up to not clutter too much crap. You know what I always hated? When my teacher would not erase the board completely. There we go. All right. So now, we're going to figure out this one, right? So 8x raised to the 1/3, right? 8x raised to the 1/3, and we're going to divide it by what we factored out. So 4x raised to the -2/3. All right, so first of all, 8 divided by 4, that's equal to 2. So our leading coefficient is going to be a 2. And then here we have x raised to the 1/3 and x raised to the -2/3. We have the same base, right? An x and an x. So we'll keep the x and then just subtract the exponents, starting with the one on top first. So we're going to write 1/3 minus the one down here, which is -2/3. All right, so this is going to be equal to 2x. And then here, subtracting a negative is the same thing as adding, right? So we're going to have 1/3 plus 2/3. So this is going to be equal to 2x, and then on top, 1 plus 2 is equal to 3. So we get 3 over 3, which is equal to 2x raised to the first power, or simply just 2x, all right? So then here, we're going to have 2x. Boom, son, or daughter. All right, you friggin' geniuses, now let's do number 3. So here we have x plus 3 raised to the 1/2 minus x plus 3 raised to the 3/2, all right? So again, you always want to just factor out the biggest term that they both have in common. Here we can see that they both have an x plus 3 in common, all right? And then you also want to factor out the smallest exponent. So here 1/2 is smaller than 3/2, right? So we'll factor out this 1/2 right here. All right, so what are we going to have left in our parentheses? So again, we just need to do these little division problems here. So first of all, we're going to have, let's just write it over here. We're going to have x plus 3 raised to the 1/2, and we're going to divide it by what we factored out, which is the exact same thing, right? X plus 3 raised to the 1/2. So anything divided by itself is equal to simply 1, okay? Now here we have a subtraction symbol, right? So we're going to subtract. And then again over here, we're going to divide by x plus 3 raised to the 1/2. So then here, this is going to be equal to, well, as you can see, we have the same base, right? X plus 3, x plus 3. So you're going to keep the x plus 3. And then you just have to subtract the exponents, starting with the one on top first. So we're going to have 3/2 minus the one on bottom, which is 1/2. So then this is going to be equal to x plus 3 raised to the, let's see, 3 minus 1 is equal to 2. So we get 2 over 2, which is equal to x plus 3 raised to the first power, or simply equal to just x plus 3. Okay, so here we're going to, in parentheses, write it as x plus 3. All right, and let's move that just so we can see what we're doing a little bit more clearly here. Now, one last thing that we can do is distribute this negative sign into the parentheses. So let's just rewrite this whole thing one last time. So we're going to say x plus 3 raised to the 1/2 times, and then our big 1 right there. And then distributing that negative sign in there, we're going to get negative x minus 3. All right. So then here, let's write it again, x plus 3 raised to the 1/2. And then in parentheses, we have, let's see, 1 minus 3 is equal to negative 2. So we're going to have negative 2 minus x. All right, so this would be your answer. That works fine and dandy. But one last thing, if you wanted to do it, is factor out this negative sign from this negative 2 and this negative x. All right, so if you wanted to, you could factor that out and just put it all the way out here in front. So you could rewrite your answer as negative x plus 3 raised to the 1/2, and then we'd be left with 2 plus x, right? These would both turn positive if we took out that negative sign out there in front. All right, so either one of these would work. Boom. All right, so for our next trick, we're going to solve this bad boy right here. So we have x squared plus 4 in parentheses raised to the 3/2 plus x squared plus 4 in parentheses raised to the 7/2, all right? So again, the biggest thing that we can factor out right here are what we have in parentheses, right? So we can factor out these x squared plus 4s, all right? And then the smaller exponent here would be the 3/2, right? So let's take that out as well. And what are we going to be left with? All right, so again, let's just turn these into little division problems. So first, we're going to have x squared plus 4 raised to the 3/2 divided by what we factored out, which is the exact same thing, right? X squared plus 4 raised to the 3/2. So this is going to be equal to just 1. All right, and then we have our plus sign. And then here, this one's different, so let's write this one out. So we're going to have x squared plus 4 raised to the 7/2 divided by x squared plus 4 raised to the 3/2. All right, so then here we have the same base, right? X squared plus 4, x squared plus 4. So keep the x squared plus 4, and then just subtract the exponents starting with the one on top. So we're going to have 7 squared minus, or 7/2 minus 3/2 squared. Come on. All right, and this is going to be equal to x squared plus 4, And then on top we have 7 minus 3, which is equal to 4. So we're going to get 4 over 2, which is equal to x squared plus 4. 4 divided by 2 is just 2. All right, so then here, or here I should say, in this empty spot, we're going to have x squared plus 4, and it's squared, right? Okay, cool. Now, we're not done, unfortunately. There's one last thing that we have to do, and that is simplify this binomial right here because it's squared, right? So we actually have to multiply it out. So we have x squared plus 4 squared, right? So here we can write it, I'll just write it over here. We have x squared plus 4 times x squared plus 4. So first of all, x squared times x squared, that's equal to x to the 4th. And then x squared times 4, that's equal to plus 4x squared. And then 4 times x squared, that's also equal to 4x squared. And then 4 times 4 is equal to 16. And then simplifying this, we're going to get x to the 4th plus 8x squared plus 16. All right. So when we multiply this out, it simplifies to x to the 4th plus 8x squared plus 16. So we're going to replace this with this. All right. So then let's write this out one more time here. So we're going to get x squared plus 4 raised to the 3/2 times, and then we still have our big one right there, and that's going to be plus, and then this whole thing right here, right? So plus x to the 4th plus 8x squared plus 16. So here we're going to get x squared plus 4 raised to the 3/2. And then in parentheses, the only thing we can combine here is the 1 and the 16, so that's 17, right? So we're going to have x to the 4th plus 8x squared plus 17. Boom. So if you found the video helpful, make sure to leave a thumbs up down below. And if you have any questions, let me know in the comments section below.